Good evening, everyone. You're all very welcome here this evening for our webinar, Coping with Exam Anxiety. Anxiety is not a bad thing, and it's something all of us will experience at some stage in our lives. It's when it starts to impact on our everyday life that we may need to look at ways to manage it. As you know, we're coming up to that time of year again when children are getting ready to sit exams. We hear from many children and young people who contact us through our Childline listening service about how they're feeling overwhelmed by school. They've described a cycle where studying leads to stress, which can affect their results and then create more pressure. Some have told us that they feel caught between high expectations at home and at school, while also trying to keep up friendships and look after their emotional well-being. Others talk to us about feeling overloaded with homework and with study and not having enough time for things that they enjoy. These are just some of the things that young people are sharing with us, and I suppose they give us a really important insight into what children and young people are experiencing on a day-to-day basis. My name is Siobhan Harvey, and I'm the National Parenting Lead with the ISPCC. Also joining me here this evening is my colleague Niamh Clark, who's the National Children's Lead, and Bree O Neill, who's our National Childline Digital Coordinator, who we're delighted to have here with us this evening. As I mentioned already, young people are getting ready to sit exams, be it fifth year or first year, or the state exams like our junior and leaving cert. They may be feeling a little bit more anxious at this time. So Bree is here this evening to talk about anxiety and how it affects us. She's going to focus on understanding anxiety, as well as increasing your knowledge and coping skills to support the child in your life, and hopefully leaving you with a toolkit of resources. So I'd like to thank you all for taking the time out and being here with us this evening. In a moment, I'm going to talk through a little bit about our services that we offer here in ISPCC and the different programmes before I introduce Bree to start the main talk for the evening. Firstly, I do just have a little bit of housekeeping before we get started. So you may have noticed that all participants have been placed on mute with their cameras off. It will stay that way for the duration of the webinar. We will be having a Q&A session at the end, so if you do have any questions, please pop them into the Q&A feature and we will try to get to as many as possible. If we don't get to answer your question, please feel free to contact us afterwards. We'll pop all our contact details up at the end. And maybe if you don't feel comfortable asking a question here tonight, that's okay too. You can reach out to us after the webinar as well. And just to remind everyone that our webinar here this evening is being recorded and it will be made available on ISPCC platforms. So just a little bit about the services that ISPCC offer and the various different programs. We're probably most known for our Childline listening service, which is a 24/7 service available to children and young people up to including the age of 18 via phone and online chat. And we also have our Ask the Team service, which is where children and young people can pop us in a question around anything they want and we'll reply to them. We have our Childline Therapeutic Support Service, which provides children, young people and families with therapeutic supports. And we can meet children and young people and families wherever they feel most comfortable. This may be at home, it could be online, it might be within a community centre or within their school. And this service we have throughout various locations throughout the country. Some of our programs that we have on offer is our Smart Moves program. And this is a schools transition program which aims to support the emotional resilience of children as they prepare to transition from primary to secondary school. Our Shield is our anti-bullying program, which aims to support any organisations that work with young people in their efforts to proactively manage bullying. We have our digital mental health and wellbeing programs, and I know Bree will talk a little bit more about these as well, and they're aimed at reducing anxiety for children and young people, and also digital programs for parents and carers. Other supports we have for parents are our Parenting Hub, and this is on the ISPCC website where it publishes articles in relation to parenting and parenting support on a range of various different topics. Included in that we have our Digital Ready Hub, which is a trusted destination for information on how you can support your child and young person to have a positive experience online. We also have a support line where you can contact us. It's a listening service, offers information, advice and emotional support to parents and carers. And that opens Monday to Friday between 9 a.m. to 1 p.m. And similar to our Ask the Team, we have Ask Robin, a service for parents where they can ask us a question, pop it in and we'll reply back. So that was a whistle-stop tour of the services. And if you'd like to find out any more about them, if you log on to www.ispcc.ie. You'll find out more. So now I'd like to introduce you all to Bree O Neill, who is ISPCC's National Childline Digital Coordinator. Bree started her career in psychology in Cape Town in South Africa. After graduating cum laude and obtaining her honours degree in 2015, Bree gained experience in both individual and group counselling and crisis trauma counselling. She devised and implemented treatment plans, developed and presented psychoeducational content, created and conducted participant interviews, and conducted career and psychometric assessments while working in the private sector as well as a voluntary basis as a counsellor and researcher. Bree then went on to fulfil her lifelong dream when she moved to Ireland and obtained her master's degree in psychology here in the University of Limerick in 2020. And since 2021, Bree has joined the ISPCC and has played a pivotal role in the promotion, delivery and coordination of our digital mental health and wellbeing programmes. With both the professional and personal interest in experience of anxiety, Bree strives to assist others in building their resilience, conquering their fears and developing healthy coping mechanisms. So Bree is here this evening to talk to you about anxiety and how it affects us all. She will focus on increasing your knowledge and help you learn coping skills to support the child in your life, leaving you with a toolkit of resources. We're delighted to have Bree here this evening. You're very welcome, Bree.
Thank you, Siobhan. It's always a nice ego boost at the start of our sessions. And thank you to everyone for joining us. I know we all have busy lives, evening time, generally supper time. So to take the time out here is really great. As Siobhan mentioned, I aim to provide an understanding of anxiety and then also how best to support an anxious young person, especially around exam time. So we'll start with an explanation of anxiety, discuss the symptoms, and then we'll follow on with some tips around how best to support a child or young person who experiences anxiety in general, and then anxiety around exams and studying in particular. I will then end the webinar kind of sharing information about a service very close to my heart, our anxiety management programs. So we can move to the next slide, please. All right, so firstly, anxiety in and of itself is not a bad thing. It's something all of us will experience at some stage in our lives. Anxiety is a response to a threat or a danger, and some anxiety is normal. It keeps us safe. It can help to ensure we are prepared for an important event like a presentation, like I'm doing right now, or a test. And it can also help us respond to a threat, such as a snake, especially if you come from South Africa, or a speeding car. But anxiety, importantly, becomes a problem when it interferes with how we function in our daily lives. So maybe your young person doesn't want to go to school or get on a flight, or even as adults, we might avoid a promotion at work. Basically, what it boils down to is an overestimation of the danger and an underestimation of our ability to cope with this threat that we're facing. Thank you, Neve. So many of us would have heard of the 3 F's before. Fight, flight, and freeze refers to the way in which we may handle anxiety-inducing situations. And basically, it's an inbuilt physiological defense mechanism or stress response that harkens back from prehistoric times. And what it does is it helps us respond to perceived threats. And knowing how we and or our children react can be really helpful when it comes to learning how to manage that anxiety. So I'm going to go through each just to give you an idea of the different ways the 3 F's may present. So looking at fight, this refers to an active defense response where the individual takes action to handle the threat. It is generally associated with an increased heart rate and breathing, muscle tension, dry mouth, dilated pupils. So this may present in your child as angry outbursts, being argumentative, or even physical behaviors such as hitting or kicking. Flight, on the other hand, refers to attempting to escape the danger. And like fight, it's also associated with an increased heart rate and breathing. There's muscle tension, the dry mouth, the dilated pupils. So your child who may be in flight mode might be restless. They may fidget a lot, or they may even hide and run away from the situation. So they might escape to their room. Finally, we have the freeze response, and this refers to incidences where a person becomes immobile. It involves the opposite to what we've heard in fight and flight. It involves a decrease in the heart rate, physical immobility, as well as muscle tension. A child in freeze mode may be unable to communicate or even respond to communication. You might see them holding their breath, for instance, or they zone out when in this freeze state. I always liken it to a mouse trying to escape from a cat. They sit very still, trying not to be observed, noticed. So it might be helpful for you to consider how your child responds when it comes to exams or even exam prep. Are they having angry outbursts or engaging in avoidance behaviors, for example? Thanks, Neve. Now, many children and young people may actually not understand what it is that they are feeling, or they may not feel ready to talk about their experiences. So it's up to us, the adults in the room, to keep an eye out for the following factors, and it can be really helpful in determining whether or not your child is experiencing anxiety. Many young people report having kind of stomach aches, the increased heart rate that I mentioned earlier, numbing or tingling sensations in their fingertips, their lips and other extremities. Not many people would know to associate that with anxiety. They also may have a kind of a tight feeling in their chest. Other things to look out for: anxiety is known to change patterns in eating or sleeping. It can bring about nightmares even. And as you would imagine, when you're anxious, things like focusing or remembering things can be very hard to do. You might also want to look out for emotional outbursts that don't seem fitting to the given situation. They're a bit extreme. Also instances of anger and irritability, reassurance seeking, and avoidance is another big one. Thank you. So the vicious cycle of anxiety is a really easy way kind of to show the cyclic nature of anxiety and the way in which certain behaviors that we may indulge in actually increase anxiety. So if we think about it, anxiety generally starts with a degree of anxiety, which then leads to kind of a hyper awareness of potential dangers, as well as an increase in the physical symptoms of anxiety that I've already mentioned, like the heart rate, sweaty palms, trouble breathing. This, more often than not, then results in escape or avoidance behaviors, or the angry outbursts we spoke of, not wanting to go to school, for example, or not even wanting to prepare for exams. And this does provide short-term relief, if we think about it. Your child didn't have to experience that discomfort of even thinking about exams. But ultimately, in the long term, this brings about an increase in the physical symptoms of an anxiety, as well as a loss of confidence in their own ability to cope, and also an increase in use of safety behaviors. So you can see how it just keeps getting worse and worse if it's not addressed accordingly. I mentioned safety behaviors. These would be things like looking down as opposed to making eye contact. It might be ignoring a phone call, not answering the doorbell, or in the case of exams, not wanting to prepare or even talk about exams. Thanks, Neve. Just quickly going back to the cycle of anxiety, it can be broken. There is hope. It does take much patience, much practice and perseverance. I always describe it as a marathon, not a sprint. And we will be looking at ways to break the cycle in a few slides. But now that we have more of an understanding of anxiety and some knowledge around its symptoms, we can now move on to the ways in which we can help our young people to tackle their anxiety in general and in an effective manner. So while the following tips that I'm going to talk about are not exam stress specific, they can be used leading up to and during the exam period. They're very adaptable. So please do, while I'm talking through them, start considering the ways in which you and your family can incorporate these tools that we're going to discuss in your daily lives. Now, this is a really simple thing that can be very impactful for families and those experiencing anxiety. One way to manage it is something that's known as monitoring. What this does is allow us to intervene before the anxiety takes over. Always remember, awareness is key. One of the first steps that we take is awareness. So what we can do is keep an eye on situations or events that induce anxiety, and we keep an eye on what level the anxiety is before, during, and after the situation. And we do so by rating it out of 10 at each stage. So 1 being no anxiety, 10 being I'm an anxious volcano that's about to explode. This monitoring works really well with people in their young teens. Then another way to kind of monitor anxiety levels is to use what is known as body mapping. It might sound familiar to some of you. This is a visual activity that can be really useful for helping younger people to recognize and understand kind of big emotions like anxiety. And a key aim of body mapping is to develop the self-awareness around the physiological symptoms of anxiety or any big emotion, which will then allow a greater opportunity to respond to those warning signals that our bodies are giving us. Basically, body mapping begins with scanning the body to locate and identify where and how the individual experiences the emotion, such as butterflies in the belly, the tightness in the chest, racing thoughts. This is a great activity to try with younger children because it's a visual exercise, but it genuinely can be helpful for people of all ages, ourselves included. Monitoring allows us to intervene before the child's anxiety reaches too high a level. And we intervene by using activities such as mindfulness tools or breathing exercises, grounding meditations. I'll give examples of those in the next slide. When it comes to us as the parents and carers, one of the most important things we can do is pause when our child or children become anxious. We have to try to remain calm instead of immediately reacting to the anxiety, either from a place of frustration or concern. A pause can create space between your emotions and your reactions, and you kind of become a relaxed counterbalance to your child's anxiety, which can help them to calm their emotions. The second step is then to understand your child's emotions. The aim here is to acknowledge what they are feeling. So take the time to understand the source of their worry and help them to name their emotions. I will say, in all honesty, this can be a very challenging thing to do. It may not be clear what your teenager is worrying about. They might find it difficult to talk, to explain what it is that they're feeling. They may shut down, they may get angry. In these situations, you have to do a little bit of detective work and spend the time to encourage them to express what's on their mind. Once you've acknowledged your child's anxiety, the next step would be to take action and respond positively with warmth, with empathy. And when I say taking action in this instance, what I mean is employing techniques such as the relaxation exercises, or helping them to face their fears gradually, or it could be coming up with a plan together to help them to tackle their exams. So on our next slide, we are going to look at some breathing exercises and mindful activities that can really be helpful in managing the symptoms of anxiety. What these activities do is help by activating our parasympathetic nervous system. Our parasympathetic nervous system is basically a network of nerves that relax the body after periods of stress or danger. So we want to get that network of nerves working so that we can get into a relaxed state. It's also involved in other kind of life-sustaining processes like digestion, and during times when you're feeling safe and relaxed. So I've got a short video now that explains mindfulness really well. I'll just warn you, it was made quite a while ago, so please forgive that, but the sentiment absolutely stands. So I'll ask Neve there to press play for us, and we'll watch that for a few minutes. Thank you for playing that. I was very disappointed to hear that we aren't going to end up in a world with rainbows and unicorns, but I do like the fact that it can help us manage our emotions. I really like the fact that it mentions the idea of the pause, so giving ourselves time to respond rather than reacting in big moments. So breathing exercises can be used anywhere, and they don't cost a thing, and nobody has to know that they're being done. I have the 333 version on your screen, and it's incredibly impactful if done conscientiously and repeatedly. For younger children, blowing bubbles is a really fun way to work on the breath. They don't know that that's what they're doing, but they are. They're breathing in a consistent way. It can activate their parasympathetic nervous system. And then, and actually, I blow bubbles when I'm anxious, and it's just fun. And I'm a full-grown 43-year-old woman, so I don't think we're ever too old to blow bubbles. For older teens who maybe don't want to be blowing bubbles in public when they're anxious, sucking sweets or chewing gum can activate that parasympathetic nervous system that I've mentioned. And what it does is help our bodies to relax by getting our bodies to believe that it's not in danger, but rather in the rest and digest phase. I would advise everybody who's going to try breathing exercises, grounding activities, to practice these exercises. Make them a habit before using them in an actual situation that causes anxiety. You don't want to get anxious about the fact that you're not sure if you should be breathing in at this moment or out or holding your breath. Get used to them, practice them. And I would try and do it for at least 5 minutes to really wake your body up to the fact that it doesn't need to be in a state of anxiety. So these exercises can be used along with monitoring to halt that anxiety process. I would also suggest with the monitoring, if a level is being described at a 4, start using the breathing exercises. It's so much harder if the anxiety is at an 8 and now you're trying to do it. That's why monitoring can really help. Let's not go over a 4 or a 5 out of 10. We can move on, please. Now, another big way to tackle anxiety is to avoid avoidance. If we look back to the cycle of anxiety that we mentioned earlier, avoiding anxiety-inducing situations merely serve to increase safety behaviors. It lowers confidence levels and ultimately either keeps anxiety at the same level, so it's never improved on, or it actually increases anxiety. So in the next slide, we're going to look at a technique that is used to help us tackle our fears. It's something called graded exposure. It's also sometimes called habituation. And basically, this involves breaking down a fear into easy to-do steps, starting with the step that causes the least anxiety. So for a young person who's stressed about upcoming exams, for example, the first step might be to gather all the resources that they need to study: textbooks, past exams, online resources, videos, and the like. The next step may be creating a study timetable and so forth. The important part to remember is that this does need to be done slowly, and you only move to the next step when the step before no longer causes anxiety whatsoever. And it's also important to remember that this technique does take time. Remember, marathon, not a sprint. So it shouldn't be rushed, and doing so can actually be really counterproductive and will halt any progress that you've made thus far. Thank you. So the very natural feeling as a parent or a carer is to want to take away your child's fear, to provide reassurance, and reassurance has its place. But excessive reassurance seeking and providing is unhelpful. Basically, what reassurance seeking is an attempt to reduce anxiety, but actually it can result in increased avoidance, as it reinforces the idea that the young person cannot cope with uncertainty or cannot cope with distress. It also validates the worry, because after all, why seek and then receive reassurance if there's nothing to worry about? So although it's difficult, we can stop reassurance-seeking behaviors, and we do so by all involved agreeing to stopping asking for and providing excessive reassurance. This agreement is best made outside of an anxiety-inducing situation. It's also helpful for the young person and their family members to identify various situations which cause excessive reassurance seeking. And then you can write down helpful responses on a card. Your young person can then agree to pull out the card and read it whenever they would usually ask somebody for reassurance. This is really activating their ability to rely on the self, okay, in times of stress. We're going to move on to the next slide now. Now, I mentioned this when we started, but while the techniques that I've just covered will be helpful in general and can be applied to exam time in particular, I'm now going to focus on a few more kind of exam stress targeted things that we can do to support our young people. I'm sure you know this, but it's always good to reiterate. Having a plan or a routine in place can help your child move from a feeling of being overwhelmed and out of control and stressed out to feeling in control. And then following through with that plan proves to your young person that they are indeed capable and they are indeed resourceful. A routine can never be overemphasized. And remember, a good routine takes into consideration all the things that we as humans need to be happy and healthy. So having a specific timetable is a huge help with the routine, and writing it out by hand is actually a great way to make the plan stick. For some reason, the communication between our hand and our brain really makes it stick in our brains. I mentioned that it's good to consider all the things that we need to be happy and healthy. So remind your child to give themselves a short break if they plan on studying after school. Letting our minds and letting our bodies just decompress after the busyness of school will really help when it comes to focusing at study time. Studying can be lonely. I don't know if you guys remember, it can be a really tough thing to do. So another helpful thing you can do for your child is to let them know that you are there to help. Or maybe they've got an older sibling who's really good at maths or really good at history, and that they are willing to be there for support if needed. I really like the idea of a timer. And what this does is help the young person stick to their timetable and the routine that they've planned out. And it also helps to ensure that your child takes a break as needed, or moves on to the next task. So they're making sure they're getting everything that they had planned done. We can move to the next slide. encourage your child to reward themselves along the way. And perhaps you guys can come up with rewards together. Having something to look forward to. I know I look forward to the holidays that I've booked in the work year. Can be incredibly motivating, and it also helps us to just get started when we're finding that difficult to do. And it also helps us to keep going when things get tough, that real carrot at the end. The reward can be anything from a social or relaxing activity or a treat, such as a chocolate at the end of the day. And then maybe you can have something bigger planned for when the exams are all over and said and done. This is a controversial one. So naturally, we don't want our children to be distracted by their phones when they're studying. But do keep in mind that phones and other devices can actually be a really useful study aid when appropriate. Also, getting into an argument about their device right before they're beginning to study will do neither of you any good in the moment. It's also helpful to consider your child's learning style and then encouraging them to cater to the way that they learn best. I know for me that saying out loud to somebody what I've just learned can be incredibly helpful. So that they might want to explain to you what they've just read about. On the other hand, they may be more of a visual learner, so they can watch a video on the topic. And then finally, having some supportive statements that are reassuring but not heading into the over-reassurance category can be very beneficial as well. And this can be anything simple, really, but anything from acknowledging, I know studying is challenging, and I also know that you've faced tough situations before. So we're acknowledging that what they're doing is tough, but we're also reinforcing the idea that they are resilient and they can do the difficult thing. Something else might be, I'm proud of how much effort you're putting into this. It's always nice to get a bit of praise. It can be really motivating for some of us. And a very simple, I believe in you, are all options. These kind of comments don't generally should help not getting into a back and forth and an argument. It's simply supportive, I'm here for you type of statements. Thank you. We'll go to our next slide. Now, a lot of you parents and carers may have picked up on this, but frequently study and exam stress is actually caused by the way young people think. And stress levels are often highly influenced by self-critical or perfectionistic thinking, such as, I'm no good at this. I'm going to fail. I can't get it all done in the time that I have. My parents or my teacher are going to be so angry with me if I don't get XYZ result. I have to do exceptionally well to get into the university I would like to. These types of pressurizing negative thinking can be incredibly demotivating. But there are things we can do to help our child overcome these thoughts. One of the things is to help them realize that thoughts aren't necessarily true. Thoughts are not fact after all, but it's very hard to be tricked by our minds into thinking that our thoughts are absolutely factually correct. So a good way to deal with these kind of underlying negative thoughts is to challenge them. And you can do so by asking questions like, is this really true? Is there evidence to back what it is that I'm thinking right now? Am I feeling this way because I'm really tired or hungry or I've had a tough day? And then you can also ask questions around like, is there a more realistic way to think about this? We're not looking for unfounded positivity. We're looking for a realistic thought pattern here. Thank you. And then finally, another incredibly helpful way to manage anxiety is to engage in the ISPCC's Digital Mental Health and Wellbeing Program service. Here at Childline, we have 3 programs on offer aimed at anxiety management. The Space from Anxiety program is aimed at 15 to 18-year-old young people who experience low to moderate anxiety. And then our Supporting an Anxious Child or Supporting an Anxious Teen programs are directed at parents and carers who would like to learn how to empower their 5 to 18-year-old child to manage their anxiety. Moving to the next slide. Our programs have been built in conjunction with leading clinical and subject matter experts. These programs are digital interventions that are evidence-based, easy to use, human-supported, and they use tools like activities and quizzes, audio and visual clips that help manage anxiety and reduce the symptoms of anxiety. And they have been clinically proven to bring about long-term positive results. When moving on to our next slide, with the help of a supporter, that's the human supported bit that I mentioned, it takes around 8 to 12 weeks to work through the program. There are 7 modules in the Space from Anxiety program and 8 core modules in the program aimed at adults, each taking around 45 minutes to work through. And then your supporter can also unlock various and relevant mini modules according to the needs of the young person or the parent and carer engaging our service. Supporters have access to the young person or parent's work once a week. This service does not involve face-to-face sessions. There's no need to travel. This can be really helpful if a young person is anxious and they're just not comfortable with face-to-face sessions quite yet. And all communication between our person engaging in the service and the supporter is in written form. So I'm going to hand back to the rest of our team here. I hope you have found this session helpful today. I just want to say to parents, it's a difficult time for the whole family around exam time, but consistency is key. Practice some of the tools and skills that I've mentioned today. They often take a little bit of time to work. Give it time, try them out, adapt them to suit you and your family's needs. And we have a whole lot more of these types of skills available in our digital mental health service as well. So thank you for having me this evening.
Bree, thanks so much. A very useful and informative session again from you this evening. And as a mother of junior cert students this year, I found your tips incredibly useful, and I'll be sure to pass them on. And really that phrase of marathon, not a sprint, has definitely landed for me this evening anyway. So thank you again. We're going to, I'm going to share a quick anonymous form with everybody watching before we go to our Q&A. And this just to help us gather your feedback on our webinar and to let us know if there's anything else you'd like us to present on in the future as well. So we'd really appreciate you taking a few moments to complete it, as it pops up there now in the form of a QR code. And also Siobhan's going to share it in the Q&A box as well, but we will email it out to all participants at the end of tonight's session as well. Again, I'd like to remind parents and carers joining us tonight of Supporting an Anxious Child and Teen programme that Bree talked about. And these are our guided self-care programmes to help you and your child and your young person to better understand their anxiety and to minimise the distress often associated with it. And we'll share our details now coming up on screen. So just before we go to our Q&A now, I'll share some additional supports that we do have, as well as our digital mental health and wellbeing. So a reminder of our support line, which is open to 9 to 1, Monday to Friday, and you can reach us on 01522 4300. And we also have our parenting support email at parentingsupport@ispcc.ie. You'll find our Ask Robin service on ispcc.ie and our Parenting Hub and our Digital Ready Hub. And if you'd like to reach out to Bree and the team, you can contact them on Space from Anxiety at ispcc.ie. We are also delighted to announce that Bree will be back tomorrow evening at 7 o'clock to deliver another webinar to young people aged 12 plus, to young people and their parents and carers around exam anxiety, and we hope you can join with your young person. We're going to move now to our Q&A section. I'll come back to sharing our details there as well at the end of the session, or I'll just leave them up there now as we do the Q&A. Actually, maybe some people might want to get that. So if you do want to ask Bree a question, please pop it into the Q&A box there and we'll get to as many of them as possible. So Bree, if you're ready for a couple of questions, that would be...
Yes.
Yeah, ready for it. So we've one there now. So what do I do if my child doesn't want to study? He gets cross and he turns and it turns into an argument.
Okay. Firstly, I would like to say that this is not an uncommon situation. Many parents and carers experience similar situations in their home. I get that feedback from adults engaging in our anxiety management service all the time. What I would say to that is choosing the right time to talk is incredibly important. That's when you both actually have the time to chat. Pardon me, it would be at a time or in circumstances where your child is most likely to open up to you. That might be driving in the car. It takes away a lot of pressure when people are sitting side to side rather than facing each other. Children are more likely to open up then, or it might be if you've gone for a walk in the park or taken a dog for a walk in a relaxed setting where you both have time to focus on each other. So right time to talk is really important. I would also like to point out that many young people do turn to anger kind of as a way of ending tough conversation with their parents. So I would recommend using the pause to gather your own emotions if this happens. If both of you are angry, if both of you are frustrated, the conversation isn't going to go anywhere constructive. So use the pause so you have time to respond rather than react and escalate the situation, and try to get them to share what's going on for them with you. Is it a confidence issue? Is it a fear of failure? And let that guide your approach. Another thing you could do is try the kind of incentives and consequences approach, where you provide understanding, you provide support and encouragement, and also hold them accountable for their actions. Another thing you can do is support your young person by creating a study routine. We've mentioned that before. Having a plan immediately impacts on us emotionally. We feel more in control when we have a plan. So help them create that study routine that includes all the things I mentioned before: having rest, having social time, eating, sleeping. Sleep is another huge thing. I would always say, and I'm going to mention it in tomorrow night's webinar, I would hate for any child to spend the night before an exam trying to cram it all in. They're doing themselves an absolute disservice. So a routine that includes all the factors that make us healthy and happy. You could also perhaps give the choice of grinds or extra classes if that's a possibility for your family. And in terms of giving rewards, it might be something as simple as fewer chores, for example, but only if they actually start to study. And then at the same time, also being very clear with regards to consequences, such as making like privileges around time spent playing video games dependent on study effort. also finally with that point, the feedback I get from young people in my service around exams and studying is I hear it repeatedly. There's a lot of fear around disappointing their parents or disappointing their teachers. So if you can let your child know that you praise effort, not outcome, that you will love your child no matter what. It's about the effort that they put in, not the end result. I hope that helps.
Thank you. I think there's an awful lot in your answer there, Bree, that will be very useful there. And I think it's reminding that it is a stage, a time in their life. It's I suppose not the be all and end all, you know, and that there is ways and means to get where you want to go in life as well. So we can find different ways to get there as well. So very, very useful. Bree, then there's another one around a young person being very motivated coming up to the mocks, but since the mocks has fallen off from their study, do you have any tips and advice around that?
I like to reinforce previous behavior that worked. So what were the factors around your young person doing really well, being really prepared for the mocks, and let's try and recreate that. You could also say, I know you did so well because X, Y, and Z. What can we do now to make that happen again for you? Also, remind your child how good they felt when they made the effort. Again, it's something I'm going to mention in the webinar last night. I know what it's like to sit in an exam hall, open the paper and go, oh God, I really wish I had studied. I don't want that feeling for any young person. So remind them how good they felt when they sat down, got their paper and were able to answer, because they made the effort. They took the time to prepare. And again, the incentives and rewards, try and do it as a team, a collaboration. What do you think will help you get back into that really strong mindset this time? And what support you with that? Does that cover its need?
Yeah, that sounds really good. Thanks, Bree. That's fantastic. I don't think we've any other questions there. I suppose just I'd like to bring up the conversation around maybe exercise around this time, because sometimes young people can fall away from getting out and about. They maybe become very intense around their studying. Do you have any thoughts around exercise, around study time?
Absolutely. So I mentioned creating a routine that includes all the things that help us be happy, healthy individuals. And that absolutely includes things like eating healthy foods and making sure to get some time out in nature and getting our blood flowing in a healthy way with exercise. In terms of, I'm not a nutritionist, I cannot speak from that angle, but I do know that if I have an incredibly heavy lunch, I'm going to head into a lunch coma. So consider what it is that we're having for lunch that's going to be fueling for the body, but not tiring for the body, and take us away from a studying mindset. I mentioned taking time to decompress after school before starting studying. That's vitally important. That's a wonderful time to go outside into the garden and play with the dog, for example, or go for a 15-minute walk just to do pull ourselves towards ourselves. And it will really help in terms of focus if we just get out, get our blood flowing, get some fresh air, and we'll be, it's a hell of a lot easier after that to come and sit down and focus. If we're coming from a school environment that's loud, it's intense, it's busy, our mind is going to be racing, our body's going to be all hopped up. Regular exercise is a great way just to pull ourselves towards ourselves. So I would absolutely include that in our routine.
fantastic. Thanks, Bree. I think it can be something that we can forget, even in our everyday lives ourselves, when we're working. So I think it's very, very important to remember. It's very positive for us. Bree, I don't see any more questions coming in there now this evening, but a reminder to everybody watching that if you do have questions, if you don't want to ask here, you can contact one of us, and our emails are up there on screen, and we'd be happy to talk to you or to answer any of your questions going forward. So please do reach out to us. We'd like to conclude tonight's webinar. Again, I want to say a big thank you to you, Bree, for joining us, and to everybody at home that is watching on this lovely evening, as it turns out to be. And don't forget to join us again tomorrow evening with your young person for 7 o'clock for our webinar directed at young people as well, for them to hear for themselves. So all that's left to say is have a lovely evening. Thank you.
Thank you very much, everyone.
Thanks. Night, everybody. Bye-bye.